Even here, people are starting from scratch and are hoping the city does more to prevent future devastation.
One of the hardest hit areas devastated by Tropical Storm Gaston.
The whole building, we have to gut the building, go down to the bare brick walls because of the water damage, paintings, photos, you name it, everything's gone.
I've never seen such horror in all my days.
Yeah, look at that. You got some road damage there.
We were thinking of a plan just in case all of that water came inside the bus. What were we gonna do?
And I was like, okay, it's gonna be okay. I'm talking to 911, help is on the way, it's gonna be okay.
Water came through the kitchen and through the front door.
God was with us. He sent us an angel.
The National Weather Service tells us it was likely a 1,000-year weather event that occurred here on August 30th, 2004. Now, the River City has endured its share of devastating floods over the centuries, which is why this massive flood wall behind me was built. But as our Rob Cardwell shows us, the James River had little to do with the deluge caused by Gaston.
Richmond's northern flood wall, 4,277 feet of concrete and steel, built to protect the Shockoe Valley from the wrath of the mighty James River. It's lined with names of storms that have come and gone, wreaking watery havoc and leaving ruin in their wake. But one name is missing, a storm that turned Shockoe Bottom upside down, and the flood wall was powerless to stop it. On Monday, August 30th, 2004, the remnants of Hurricane Gaston pulled into central Virginia and hit the brakes right above the city.
It was insane.
Former CBS 6 photojournalist Chris Norton was behind the camera that day.
I'd never seen it rain that hard, probably ever, and the fact that it did it for a couple hours.
He was initially sent to a South Side neighborhood that typically floods during bad storms, but was rerouted downtown.
I can't even remember where we parked, and I can't remember how we got down here.
Eventually, he made it to the corner of Canal and 14th Streets.
We could see kind of halfway down the block, the water was up to there, and they were bringing people from the bottom up in boats. I don't know whose boats, but like regular like John boats and rafts and stuff like that. They were just bringing people up, and it was still raining.
It's estimated that as many as 14 inches may have fallen in a period of just about 8 hours.
We get big, heavy rain events quite often from tropical systems, but to have that much in that short a period of time, very unusual.
Chief Meteorologist Zach Daniels says the urban nature of Shockoe Bottom made the extraordinary situation that much worse because there was no place for the water to sink into the ground.
It was just a flash flooding event on steroids, and it happened to be in an area that everything funnels in.
And within a matter of minutes, I mean, it was truly, you've heard it said, but it was class 5-foot rapids going down 15th and down Main Street, cars being swept away, power poles being swept away, street lights being knocked down.
And it was so chaotic and so powerful. I grew up surfing, and I would have never in a million years jumped into the water to try and help. It was impossible.
Developer Bill Chapman worked on 15th Street at the time.
So the wall over by the train station, water was coming over that wall just like what you would see at Z-Dam on the James River.
At that point, he knew the only direction to go was up.
Once we were able to sort of get to safety on the second floor, looking down, it looked like an event where people were going to lose their lives.
While many rushed to get away from the rising water, first responders ran towards it.
By far the biggest weather event.
Richmond Police Chief Rick Edwards says it was an all-hands-on-deck operation.
You know, I just remember hearing the call, like people were calling 911 saying, I need the police to come pick me up and take me to this thing. And we're like, no, stay where you're at. You know, if it's an emergency, we're coming. But we can't do any good if we're getting stuck in the rain or if our car gets washed off the road.
While the bottom was ground zero, other parts of the metro dealt with their own deluge. The Powhite Parkway became submerged, causing catastrophic damage to the toll road. And Falling Creek turned into a raging river, washing away most everything in its path.
The current just swept me to right here, and this is where my truck rested. I don't think if the curb wasn't there, I would have gone right down in the gully, and I would have been a goner.
Countless acts of heroism were caught on tape during the height of the storm. Rescuers used ropes, human chains, and sheer willpower to get people to safety. Sadly, 8 people in the Richmond area lost their lives as a result of the flash flooding, mostly those who tried to drive through the high water. Then, sometime that night, the rain stopped, and as quickly as the floodwaters rose, they subsided. But come morning, the true extent of the destruction was on full display.
The devastation in terms of a lot of the businesses in the bottom is overwhelming.
It's really crazy, man, just to see all this stuff just thrown about. The walls is caved in. I got to start over on everything.
Before the flood, Shockoe Bottom was burgeoning.
It was starting to establish itself as a significant residential neighborhood.
Now, it was barely recognizable.
The area between really 15th and maybe 18th Street, especially from Main down towards the river, was just a disaster.
Nearly 24 historic city blocks were covered in filth and condemned.
After the water went down, it looked like a little kid was in a tub, had a bunch of toys, and somebody let the water out, and all the toys were like in the corner of the tub. And that's what it looked like, and it was real.
You know, but I just remember thinking, wow, we're going to be working 12-hour shifts every day until this is cleaned up.
The recovery took days, weeks, months, and even longer for some.
And, you know, I think Havana 59 was closed for years.
In the aftermath of the storm, anguish was coupled with outrage.
What is the city going to do to address the storm drains, the sewer drains, so it doesn't continue to happen? That's the question.
While the amount of rain had been unprecedented, an outdated drainage system contributed to the chaos. And almost no one in the bottom had flood insurance, since the construction of the flood wall a decade prior had taken this area out of the flood zone.
You know, for most people, it was a matter of everything they lost had to be repaid out of pocket.
And it would cost millions.
All I care about is being alive because, hey, the Lumina is dead.
But despite all the challenges, a sense of perseverance rose to the surface.
This city will come back.
It's heartbreaking, true. But I so thank God that I am alive and I can rebuild, and I'm going to.
We know through what we've already experienced that we are a resilient city and a resilient community, and this too shall pass.
20 years seems like the blink of an eye for those who survived Gaston and the flooding. And since it happened before YouTube, before the iPhone, some are just now getting a chance to really look at the storm that they lived through.
I've never seen video from that.
A once-in-a-lifetime event that will hopefully never repeat itself.
Wow.
Think about how much more stuff's down here now than 20 years ago. There's more people living down here, there's more businesses down here. You would have a lot more of a loss down here if something like that happened again.
Now, after Gaston, a task force was created to study what went wrong here in Shockoe Bottom and what kind of changes should be made. Tens of millions of dollars were ultimately dedicated to upgrading the combined stormwater and sewage drainage system, including the Dock Street pumping station, which suffered a power outage during the flooding and was thus unable to help move that water out of the bottom. In just about 8 hours, it's believed that 14 inches of rain fell right where I'm standing. That turned streets and roads into raging rivers, something that threatened the lives of everyone down here, especially those who became trapped in their cars. CBS 6 senior reporter Wayne Colville has the story of one young woman who made a split-second decision that likely saved her life.
It was one of the most riveting pieces of video to surface in the aftermath of Gaston. The storm that brought biblical flooding to parts of Richmond 20 years ago.
Just a scary moment. I've never seen anything like this.
This surveillance footage from a GRTC bus shows the raging waters rapidly rising, threatening to completely engulf the massive mass transit vehicle.
I thought I was going to die. That's how scary it was.
How ironic then that this bus driver and her passengers were able to save a life while they themselves were staring death in the face. In the back of a Petersburg coffee shop,
God, look at that.
Joanna Korkos gets a front row seat.
There was a Mini Cooper that floated by.
a backhoe that floated by. That's my car.
To a white-knuckle trip down memory lane.
That is an incredibly dangerous situation that I was in that I did not realize was as dangerous as it was. Had no idea.
It all started the afternoon of August 30th, 2004. Joanna, then a 24-year-old VCU student, had just left the campus bookstore on Broad Street and was headed home to Prince George County in her new car. Joanna didn't get very far.
The rain was deafening. Like, you could not hear yourself think. It was so loud because it was coming down so hard.
The remnants of the former hurricane had stalled above the city, bringing the traffic below to a standstill.
You know, I moved a block in an hour. Like, there was nowhere for people to go. Everything was just stopped.
That's when the downpour turned into a deluge.
Then the water really just started rushing and came out from nowhere. And the two cars that were in front of me washed away.
Moments later, the situation turned even more dire.
I just remember that the water was coming in my car and I was watching it rise and trying to decide what I was going to do next.
The two things that happened next probably kept Joanna from drowning. A bus pulled up right beside her and a wooden railroad tie floated downstream.
The only thing that saved me from floating away too was that railroad tie that washed up in between me and the bus and kind of hooked me to the bus.
Joanna had a cell phone and by that time had already called 911. When the water reached her knees, the dispatcher told her to get out of the car.
So it was very Dukes of Hazzard style, climbing out the window, climbing across the hood.
The 911 operator had already contacted the bus driver, telling her to prepare for Joanna to come aboard.
There was a passenger on the bus that helped open the window and lent me their hand to help pull me into the bus.
What were they saying?
Don't you fall.
And the sure-footed Joanna did not. The security camera capturing the moment she was pulled inside the bus, a place she and the others would remain for a long time.
Several hours, because they considered us safe and there were other people that were in worse danger.
Eventually, rescuers arrived by raft.
I can remember stepping out of the boat into just like this muck that was on the ground because I was in flip-flops. It was August and I had lost my shoes. But the guy at the pizza place right there at 18th and Main took me into his shop. I bought the fire department a pizza, and he took me into his shop, washed my feet off, gave me 2 plastic bags and 2 rubber bands to wrap around my feet.
But Joanna still had to get home, which she did thanks to the kindness of that stranger she had just met.
The pizza guy ended up, he knew his way around the city and he literally drove all the way from Richmond up and around the city and took me all the way home to Prince George that night.
The people on the bus, a railroad tie, and a pizza guy. Those are the things Joanna says helped to deliver her from disaster that August night.
I will never forget that, ever.
An experience she still can't believe she survived.
Looking back, I should have been scared, and I probably was a little bit, but 24-year-olds usually think they're pretty invincible and, oh, it's gonna be fine. I definitely had my mama's prayers around me that night for sure.
The flooding caused by Gaston was not only unprecedented, it was unexpected. And back in 2004, it was difficult to alert people once it started, if they weren't watching TV or listening to the radio. The National Weather Service tells CBS 6 that flash flood detection and warnings have improved significantly since then. The biggest advancement being that people now get those warnings on their cell phones. And Chief Meteorologist Zach Daniels says Richmonders also take flash flooding more seriously now.
And I think since Gaston, people have given it a lot more respect. Anytime we have a tropical system that comes through and we're talking about the potential for flash flooding, that's always the first thing people say. Is this going to be anywhere close to Gaston? Because that's always fresh in their memory. And it is the high water mark, so to speak, for flooding from tropical systems here in Richmond.
Remember, our weather app allows you to choose an alert location so you can get instant flash flood warnings from the National Weather Service and CBS 6. While most associate Gaston with the flooding, just a little east of here, the storm caused another kind of natural disaster. The intense rain triggered a number of landslides, the largest of which happened at the intersection of 31st and Gray Streets in Church Hill. The road crumbled and dropped some 200 feet, swallowing cars and shattering a gas line. The destabilization of the geologic formations there ultimately led to 4 nearby homes being condemned. 8 people lost their lives as a direct result of the flash flooding that occurred in Metro Richmond on August 30th, 2004. Most of them were inside cars that were overwhelmed by the rushing water. One young couple found themselves heading in that direction until a dramatic turn of events put their lives on a whole new track. Our John Burkett has the story.
For nearly 125 years, Main Street Station has stood as one of Richmond's most distinctive landmarks. A temple of terracotta and Roman brick. It looks quite a bit different than the other buildings that surround it in Shockoe Bottom. Jess and Justin Walker have a deep affinity for this remarkable piece of Renaissance revival.
Very special place to us.
In fact, inside their Hanover County home, there's a sort of shrine to it in the corner of the family room.
It's really so Richmond. Like, I love everything about the train station.
Partially because it played a pivotal role in how their love story began. On the afternoon of Monday, August 30th, 2004, Jess found herself outside the old VCU Medical Campus gym, waiting for a friend to pick her up. Then the skies opened up. So Justin, who had walked out of the gym at about the same time, made an offer Jess couldn't refuse.
It's like, you know, my car's right here. I'm happy to give you a ride home. So I was like, okay, maybe he's hitting on me, but you know, whatever. I'm gonna take the ride. I didn't want to wait any longer. It was raining.
The two knew each other a little. They had just met a few days prior at the orientation for VCU's pharmacy school. What they could not have known at the time was that the rain would turn into something climatologists estimate to be a 1,000-year weather event. As the remnants of Hurricane Gaston dragged their feet above Richmond, a foot or more of rain dropped in some places in just a few hours. In the low-lying Shockoe Bottom, the flooding hit like a freight train. And these future pharmacists would get stuck right in the middle of it when the geographically challenged Justin, new to Richmond, turned left on Broad Street instead of going right towards the fan where Jess lived.
Honestly, thinking about it now, how much of our life is revolved around him taking a wrong turn.
To get going back in the right direction, Jess had Justin cut over to Main Street. But by then, it looked more like a parking lot.
Bumper to bumper, you're moving, you know, maybe an inch or two every 2 or 3 minutes.
Moments later, Justin's Volkswagen Golf encountered the world's worst water hazard.
We get right in front of Main Street Station. I mean, smack dab in front of it. And then all of a sudden, a wall of water came.
It was a
over
literal
top of it.
wave.
An actual wave.
The motor locked up and water started pouring in through the air vents.
And that was the moment that I looked at her and I said, it's time to get out.
And I said, absolutely not. And this kid who weighs even less than he does now, somehow, at this point inside, it's waist high.
So it was
slams my seatbelt, grabs me by the neck, kicks open the door into the river. I mean, it's a river now. Swims me to the steps of the train station.
After trying to help other people get out of their cars, Jess and Justin climbed the stairs and went inside, where they found more water.
We go from first floor of Main Street Station to the second because the first floor is gone.
Once they got upstairs, they were able to get a better look at the carnage below.
All the cars that were there have now become this big cesspool of just floating mess. And
the noise was incredible. So the sound of rushing water was just,
it was insane.
Persistent. And then there was this like overwhelming smell of gasoline.
That's when Amtrak made the decision to get everybody out of the building.
Quite literally put everyone in the station on a train. Once they got everybody settled and I guess clearance to actually move, they backed us over the river and then somewhere down near like Philip Morris, they just stopped.
Dinner that night, a half sandwich cut in two, and one beer to share.
And I was like, well, I guess this is our first date. Enjoy your sandwich and your Corona. And we sleep on the train overnight.
A rocky start to their relationship, but proof they could survive anything life threw their way.
I'm kind of one of those people that needs a sign. And I think it was one of those moments where I thought, well, daggone, if God doesn't give me a sign right now, then I'm kind of a fool. And I said, I knew in my brain, I said, this is the man I'm gonna marry.
4 years later, Justin popped the question, back at the place where Mother Nature once tried to sweep them both off their feet.
He did propose on the steps of the train station,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, he's proud of that one.
Jess and Justin married in 2008, and they have 2 beautiful children who actually served as honorary photographers during our interview with their mom and dad. Now, Gaston left its mark on many businesses here in the Bottom, and it proved to be a watershed moment for one of Richmond's most popular restaurants. For I Have a Story, our Greg McQuaid and our photographer Cole Pearson show us how staff members are reflecting on that fateful day 2 decades later.
It can get pretty busy. It can get pretty nonstop.
Every lunch hour.
Right now, I'm just making a carry-out order for 2:30 pickup.
Sherwin Bunn expects a flood of orders.
Try to give it good chicken time to get it made and get it out.
The pizza cook at Bottoms Up
I'm ready, boss.
satisfies hungry customers.
The most popular one we see a lot is the Chesapeake pizza.
With nearly 20 years of experience in this kitchen, the 45-year-old has lost track just how many pizzas he has perfected.
Oh man, countless, man, countless. Can't keep up with how many you make, man. Yes, sir.
But Bunn will always remember the one afternoon an unwanted guest shows up.
That day was chaotic.
With no reservation.
It was quite a scene, man, quite a scene.
And no intention of leaving.
Yeah, it was pretty scary, man, pretty scary.
We are talking about Monday, August 30th, 2004.
Former General Manager Charlie Leister shudders, recalling that moment in time.
That Monday when the rain started, it just seemed like any other day.
Tropical Storm Gaston arrives and stalls over central Virginia.
It got to Richmond and it stopped for, 18 hours?
The skies open up.
So all that water just kept coming down and down and down.
The corner of 17th and Dock Streets, home of Bottoms Up, the lowest point in Shockoe Bottom.
And imagine what happens when your sink backs up or your bathtub. That's basically what happened. The drain got clogged and the rest is history.
On this day, the dough isn't the only item rising at the restaurant.
About 5:30 when it really started getting really rough. And I was on the ovens at the time.
Floodwaters pour into Sherwin's kitchen.
It was coming over my feet, halfway up my shins.
A security camera captures the unfolding disaster.
We could see it coming over the steps.
With water lapping at their legs.
Yeah, it was incredible. I don't look at it a lot, I'll say that.
Charlie, his staff, and even customers get stuck.
Everything that you see right there, it would have been even that much worse had glass broken, had windows broken in. This was literally water coming in from the cracks.
The situation goes from bad to worse.
And within, I would say it was probably 5 minutes, water was already almost up to my knee. And then I looked at the French doors that are right there, and it was up to my head. And that's when I was, all right, everybody upstairs, let's go.
Several feet of water swallow the restaurant and surrounding neighborhood.
I wasn't scared for myself. I was scared for the 16 people that were down here that I was responsible for. I was scared that I was gonna let something happen to them.
Yeah, like you said, it was like biblical stuff, man. I couldn't believe it. And I didn't know if I was gonna make it out of here, to be honest with you.
Before he retreats from the kitchen, Sherwin makes a decision that quite possibly prevents an even greater disaster.
I don't know, it was just instinct, man. I wasn't thinking, I don't know. I just started turning everything off, man. The ovens, the fryers.
The then 25-year-old father cuts off the gas supply leading to the restaurant.
I don't want to be over dramatic, but there were cars floating down the street. There were cars floating right past that gas line. I mean, he could have saved our lives.
Like I said, I wasn't thinking that far ahead, but I'm glad I did, though. Glad I did.
The stranded group rides out the calamity high above.
And I actually saw my car go underwater. It looked like hell. You know, it was nothing but just, it was chaos.
Hours later, a Goochland Fire and Rescue pontoon pulls people from the second floor.
You can barely see the street signs. So that's what, 10, 12 feet? Yeah, pretty scary.
So it's such a huge area of property and people's livelihoods underwater.
By midnight, floodwaters mercifully recede. Gaston moves on.
But to sit there and just watch it just beat you down live for 8, 10, 12 hours, there's just nothing like it in the world.
Bottoms up, and Shockoe Bottom lay in ruins.
Oh man, it was chaos. Cars everywhere, cars flipped upside down.
Daylight reveals the worst and true cost of the storm. 8 deaths in the Richmond area alone.
We're just fortunate nobody down here got hurt, and I feel for the people that did lose lives.
Owner Dirk Graham's dream shatters.
It was a mess.
Dirk Graham says it will cost him nearly $2 million to rebuild.
Bottoms up, closes indefinitely. He begins the slow and expensive process of rebuilding.
We had some insurance, but it was not nearly enough. So we had to go out and borrow money.
I would say it's almost even more than a landmark, but it is. It's a living landmark.
1 year and more than $1 million later, Bottoms Up reopens in August of 2005. In the remodeled kitchen, Sherwin Bunn still cranks out his popular crusts.
Yes, sir, man, yes, sir. Live to tell the story. Live to tell the story.
20 years later, Gaston is but a memory, but one visual reminder remains in the dining room.
You know, the high water mark was the low point of our business here, but it was not the end of our business here.
It was the day one callous customer arrived.
When you see Mother Nature in its fury, you better respect it, or it might be the last thing you see.
Tropical storm Gaston, a patron, they pray, never returns.
I hope I don't live through it again. I wouldn't want to do that one no more.
For I Have a Story.
Yes, sir.
I'm Greg McQuaid, CBS 6 News.
Less than 12 months before Gaston, Central Virginia took a direct hit from another named storm. In September of 2003, Hurricane Isabel knocked down tens of thousands of trees and left millions of people in the dark. When it was all said and done, it was considered one of the most damaging and costliest storms in the history of the Commonwealth. We asked Chief Meteorologist Zach Daniel how rare it is that we encountered 2 devastating storms in such a short period of time.
It's pretty wild that you had the one big wind event that everybody measures all other tropical storms or hurricanes by in Richmond, which was Isabel, and then you have the big water event, the flooding event from Gaston the very next year.
Zach says those back-to-back storms put the importance of tracking tropical systems at the forefront for meteorologists here in Richmond. It took years for some folks to rebuild and reopen, but Shockoe Bottom is a thriving neighborhood once again. Though the people who witnessed Gaston tell us they'll never forget what happened that hot August day. Despite that historic flooding and destruction down here, the name Gaston was never retired. It has been used 3 times since 2004. That now concludes our special coverage this evening, and we'll put all of these stories on our website, WTVR.com. In Shockoe Bottom, I'm Bill Fitzgerald.